Our mission, and we choose to accept it, is zero injuries and zero environmental impact. A healthy workforce and environment is key to our nation's continued success. The Mission Zero podcast is a deep dive with the industry's top experts into the health, safety, and environmental aspects of today's workplace. Our mission is to be a platform for new ideas and strategies that, when implemented, will improve our safety, our environment, and how we govern out business. We are making the world safer, and we're going to have fun doing it.
Welcome back, Mission Zero podcast. I'm here with I've known this guy for a long time, Steve Abernathy. Steve and I worked together starting at Exterran and then at Archrock when Archrock and Exterran kind of spun off from one another. And so I asked Steve to come out to the home studio and sit down and have a conversation with me about what he's doing now and what he's been doing. And Steve, thanks for coming out, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Looked forward to it and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get started, I mean, I know a little bit about you. Obviously, you and I work together. We've known each other now, gosh, it's probably 10 years or more, which is pretty crazy to think about, And but just for people listening, kind of get us started. I'm sure you came out of school and whatever you're doing, you said, "Man, I can't wait to be a safety guy." Right? So, tell me kind of how you got to where you are here today.
Yeah. All right. Well, actually, when I got out of school, I didn't know what I wanted to be. So I first couple of years there, I worked some construction, road construction. Worked for the Texas Highway Department for a year on a survey crew. As I tell
out of where?
Out of Waco.
Oh, okay.
Grew up in Waco, and just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went and did my civil duty with the state of Texas, and figured out you would starve to death if you stayed there. That was my first round with the state of Texas, and not that I ever went to prison or anything.
Right. So you figured out you'd starve to death, and you thought maybe it's changed. I'll go back at some point. Yeah.
So then I went to work on the railroad, swinging iron, laying steel and ties on tie gangs, and quickly moved into supervisory role there. Fortunately, some guys kind of spotted me, thought I had something there, and my whole goal was to outwork anybody there. So when it came to throwing rock out in the evenings out of the ballast cars, working weekends or whatnot, I'd always stick my hand up. And that kind of got me started there. So pretty quickly, they gave me my own steel gang, ran the steel gangs and tie gangs on projects. And at the same time, I was applying to engineer school to be an engineer on the train. I thought that's what I wanted to do, and did that kept applying, and they kept rejecting. I kept applying. And finally, got married along the way and put my wife through school, and then we were back in Waco. I'd lived in San Marcos for a while, following the railroad around, and she was like, this probably might not work for the long haul because I would be gone 3 weeks with the big gangs and all that. You had to make sure all the inventory was ready to go the next week because you had 110 men on a payroll,
right? And
they had to be working when we could work because you had to allow for train delays, blah, blah, blah. So, never got into engineer school and decided, well, I'm going to go back to school. And she was like, hey, let's do it. We don't have any kids or anything. So that's what we did. And about the time I quit, got the letter of acceptance to go to engineer school on the railroad. We both prayed about it and talked about it and decided, no, we've set our direction, our compass in a different way.
Yeah, you mentioned too that sort of your schedule had already kind of become a conversation piece, and if you were an engineer,
it would have been terrible.
Sure,
yeah, you'd been on the extra board for years.
Yep.
And so it was a blessing, really a blessing in our life that it happened that way. So went back to school and didn't know what I wanted to do. So thought I wanted to do chemistry, and it's kind of a quick story on how it ends up that I actually got into nuclear technology. Went and talked to the the professors and advisors in chemistry department, and they like, well, you've been out of school like 8 years. How, is that, I think probably you ought to go be a plumber or an air conditioning tech or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So I left, and I was walking out dejected and bumped into this little guy. My head was down, bumped into this little man, and he said, what's going on, bud? And I said, told him the story. They told me not to do that and go, be a plumber. He said, well, tell me your story. Tell him what was going on. And he's like, no, you can do this, but you need to come to my department and be in the nuclear side. So I did. He was a great mentor. Called him Dr. Bill. He had actually studied under Fermi for his PhD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really smart guy. Been in the Air Force with their nuclear programs. And
yeah. So he had some credentials.
Yeah, no doubt. And so it was a good experience under him. Then left that and went to Texas Tech as a radiation safety laser manager for the university. Mm-hmm. Did that for about 5 years, and then
I had forgotten you worked for Texas Tech.
Yeah, and then I really enjoyed it. Had a great boss at Texas Tech. Jim Northcutt was just a fantastic leader, and just I stayed with him as far as in contact till he passed away a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Phenomenal man, just a great example of a person, just moral compass, just is fantastic. To work under somebody like that was really good. And he turned you loose to go do what you need to do and let you innovate and let you do things and try things. So that was good. But working for the state of Texas again, it was you weren't going to get rich, and you were going to, struggle because they didn't, their pay compared to industry wasn't the same. So saw an opportunity at Halliburton. They needed an RSO and actually applied for it. And at the last minute, they offered me the job, and I actually turned it down. And did that because my wife was like, hey, I'm working still, and I'm really enjoying it. She was at South Plains College at Levelland. I was at Texas Tech, in Lubbock.
Just down the road.
Yeah, and so we were doing that. But then about a year later, we had our second son, and she's like, I really want to stay home. And I'm like, okay, but on a state salary with Texas Tech.
Right.
I don't know how that's going to work, but we just said, okay, let's wing it. And she said, well, I'll work part-time. I'm a designer, graphic designer, and illustrator and all that. So we sold the house in Levelland and moved back to Lubbock. And then it was just kind of a blessing. About 6 months later, Halliburton called me back and said, hey, we talked a year ago and you turned us down, but would you be interested in coming back? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we went to Duncan, Oklahoma, and we were there for about 9 years. But during that time, I actually transitioned. I was in there a few years, and I kept looking for opportunities in Halliburton to do other things. It was so large. So I had applied for a couple of operational roles in different areas, and finally one of the guys that was running the overall service quality program and stuff for Halliburton and all the process improvement and this and that, I kept applying. He goes, well, you don't know anything. And I was like, okay. So I went and I just started getting the books, and I started reading, studying, and got my boss at the time at Halliburton to let me take some other classes in quality management, and just figured out what's it all about, because that's what I'm about to do. I got to change something. So I did that, and then about a year later, I went back and applied again. He said, well, what have you learned? And I told him what I'd been doing and studying, and and how I'd applied that to the processes in the radiation program to improve them and stuff, and save the company money, and showed him 3 or 4 different projects where we'd literally save millions of dollars a year for the company. He's like, okay, I'm going to give you a shot. And that's what I did, and then started doing programs there, working with field operations and the business out there to improve the business, and, just kept learning and studying. And then he got promoted and promoted me to his role as, over North America. and did some great things. We had great leadership in the company at the time with Jed DiPaolo and Zeke Zarang and some of them really innovative leaders. And, they put you out there and just said, hey, here's my vision. This is what I want to do. Go figure something out. I want this to happen. And you had to go figure it out.
Right.
Did a lot of great things, and then they promoted me to Global Director of Quality for Halliburton.
Wow.
And we did some great things there, too. We, got ISO certifications all over the world with the company at the time, which were important, and put in some quality programs, reliability programs into stuff, and helped really improve a lot of the business out there. And then they said, well, hey, you've done that for 2 or 3 years. Why don't you come over here and run the learning and development program and help us revamp that? So did a similar thing. Had to learn about
right.
that. And then 2002 or so, they came back and said, hey, you've been doing this, but we really need you to go take this opportunity and go to Oklahoma, go back to Oklahoma, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I can't do it. We've moved several times on my kids, and we promised them they would stay in the same school and graduate from the school that they're in, the 2 oldest.
And you were in the Houston area.
I was in the Houston area. I'd been promoted, and we moved to Houston and all that. And so we prayed about it and discerned about it for, several weeks there, and went back and turned them down. And fortunately, they gave me a package, and I took it and went and worked for myself for a couple of years for some former executives at Halliburton, doing big projects, change projects, and things like that.
Just like consultant type work.
Yeah, consultant type work, running projects. We had built a call center, stood it up, and then, prototyped it for a company, and then he had me take it and then scale it up in Houston for him. So we did that and built them a billing center and the processes and did that. But then it was just the consulting gig wasn't working for me. I really wanted to get back in a leadership kind of role. And just so happened that former executive at Halliburton, Dan Newman, had left and went to work for Hanover, called me up and said, hey, we got an opportunity over here. I really want you to come talk to the leadership group at Hanover. We need some help and think you're the guy to help it. And did that and helped start the program there for service excellence at Hanover, and then we merged with Universal Compression to form Exterran, and took a role there in the new company in Exterran over global QHSE at the time. And then wasn't in that role very long when the president of North America at the time for Exterran, Brad Childers, was like, hey, I've been talking to Matusik, and Brian Matusik, who's I had worked for at Hanover, said, we want you to come into North America and kind of help take on a more operational role, helping us improve the business and helping me drive some things that I want to get done in the business. And so took off from there, and then had a global QHSE role as well as the operational role in North America for several years there before we really turned that and really went solely focused on operations. And that's kind of what I've been doing the last several years. Once we split off from Exterran into 2014 going into 15, we split and took the North America assets and formed Archrock. And so I've been doing operational roles there at Archrock ever since, and focused, a lot on helping us, transition now, and things, but, helping change the business, put in processes and systems and stuff that the organization needed to get better at what we were doing.
Sure.
And my current role is over transformation, strategic transformation. So it's really not just about digital transformation for us. It's really, for us, it's setting the company up for the future.
Sure.
The Brad Childers, the CEO, told us several years ago as we were rethinking strategy and where we're headed is, if we don't change, we don't really move ourselves and transform ourselves, in 5 to 7 years, we'll be obsoleted. The world's moving fast. It's this whole energy transition, and data-driven organizations, et cetera. We've got to figure out how we can run the business differently, and better than we're even doing it today. And that's kind of what we've been doing the last 3 or 4 years.
That's great. And when you and I connected, you were in the VP of QHSE role and operations services.
Yeah.
And so I always described operations services to people that were unfamiliar. I said it's all of the things that makes operations work that operations guys hate doing.
Yeah.
and so you just do that stuff. If you were in the military, they would call you the quartermaster. I mean, you just make sure it all is there and working, and then you improve on that. And so one of the things that was very impactful to me in my career, and I came into Exterran as a regional HSC manager, and so you supported my role at the corporate level, and then I had to execute all of the things that you guys were needing done. So, but what was very clear to me, and you were a huge impact in my career, and to that point, I had already had some of the tendencies that you described, where you're getting into a role and you're looking for ways to improve that, and you're looking for ways to not necessarily change what's happening, but say, hey, there's some inefficiency here. You can do it this way or that way differently, or hey, there's this maybe even a technological solution to something that someone hadn't necessarily fleshed out, and I recognize that that's kind of what you were doing, and that's a lot of the stuff that we were doing at Exterran, and it was very interesting to me, and I learned very early on by working closely with you that if you're just a safety professional, which there's nothing wrong with that, and those guys are absolutely critical, and the person carrying a clipboard and doing audits and all of that's important. But if that's all you are, then you're going to have a real tough time with longevity in the career, and especially nowadays, I think. And so is that something you recognized, or is that just part of your personality to constantly be looking for ways to improve things, or sort of be a change agent? Is that just part of your personality, or is that something you recognize strategically as good for your career?
I go back early in my career, the railroad days. I had fantastic boss on the railroad, and I had two absolutely terrible bosses on the railroad. And the first boss, Bobby Mosier, one of the biggest things I learned from him, there's always something that can be done, and there's always something that can be done better. And that's the way he looked at it. No idle time. We got to keep innovating. We got to keep improving. You got ways that we can get more ties done in a day, more miles of track laid in a day. You got to think and keep thinking. And I used that a lot as I went forward in my career. And I always was thinking of ways you could do it, creating things out there that would move more rock faster out of the laborers' way, so they could, do what they were doing faster. And it really was kind of a little bit in my DNA. Mm-hmm. And so I continued doing that everywhere I went. When I was at Tech, I got the very first low-level radioactive waste disposal using the sewage system and stuff that was rules that were created in the state of Texas back in the 80s. Went through a lot of work to make that happen. I couldn't do one of these dispersion calculations today, but you had to go through all that. But
you could probably find it on Google.
Right, but it saved us tons of money to be able to do that. And then similarly, at Halliburton, it was like, how do we improve? But the one thing that I began to learn when I really got it moving toward the quality management piece was really about the leadership aspect of HSC, and really about culture and human behavior, and really studying that, because I realized it doesn't matter how much you stick in there and you try to make an organization change by just changing process or saying you got to comply. You want to change hearts. You want to convince the organization why they need to do that. You need to surround them with process and surround them with good tools to work with and support it. But if you can't convince somebody to take ownership of it themselves, it's never going to happen.
Oh, you remember when I came back into Archrock? I'd left Exterran and then got laid off like all good people in the oil and gas industry do.
Yeah.
And I came back in, and it was right during the transition of Exterran to Archrock. And I came back in a sales role.
Yeah.
That was the first time I realized just how challenging sales actually is, and was like, man, I don't necessarily want to do this as a profession. I can do it, but I don't want to. But I realized going in, my wife asked me, she says, are you nervous about going into sales? And I was like, no. And she said, why not? And I said, it doesn't, I've been doing HSE for 15 years or whatever at that point. I said, that's a sales role. I said, I've got to go out into the field and convince a guy that I might know a better way to do that. And, oh, by the way, I've never done that. And he's been doing it longer than I might even be alive.
Yeah.
And I've got to convince that guy to listen to me. Come on, that's a sales job. And so it's interesting you put it that way. You're changing hearts and you're changing minds. And the only way you do that is to help them understand, I'm not your adversary here. I'm an advocate for you. I want you to be successful.
Yeah.
And so tell me some of the ways that you went about that when you realized, okay, we've got to really change hearts here and change minds. What were some of the things that stand out as being successful for you in doing that?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, I thought there's two ways I looked at it, but one of them is I always found that, if you want to start changing hearts and minds, find a champion. Find somebody that will champion that cause. I guess in the way kids do it nowadays, it's an influencer, right?
Right, yeah. If you've ever met an actual influencer, they're very annoying people.
But you had to find somebody trusted in the organization that you could convince that this is a different way of thinking about things. Look at it differently and put them on a pedestal and recognize them big time. So that's what I would do. I would find these champions, whether it was an operational change, an HSE change and things, and begin to approach that and use that tool to help. The other thing about culture change and things like that is, and it's not cliched at all, but it does start at the top of the organization. Mm-hmm. It absolutely does. And I can tell you, having seen the culture evolve at Exterior and into Archrock, one of the, that's probably my proudest thing, one of the most proud things in my career was seeing and being there for the longevity of seeing that culture that we nourished and evolved and how it's evolved to what it is today, to where, you don't have to convince people because they don't hang around. And they come back because they leave and they're like, I got out of here and I'm so, they don't care about safety at X, Y, Z, and the money wasn't as important as my life.
That's right. And they also realize things that they may have thought while they were there at Archrock or Exterior, and they may have thought, this is so stupid. Why are we having to do it this way? Yeah. And they leave and they realize, oh, that's why we did it that way. And you're right. That's a true testament to successful culture change, is people that come back.
Yep. And they're your biggest champions. They're your biggest recruiters.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And and culture doesn't happen by accident.
No.
You have to make it purposeful, and it can't be something, and this is true of transformation and transforming companies, whether it's the safety culture of the company or we're trying to transform truly what we're doing and how we're doing things differently. It doesn't matter. It's all the same principles that you got to apply to that, because you really got to change people's hearts, and it does have to start at the top of the organization. Once you can get that convinced, then it can spread, it can move, And the one things that I always thought was important, and then I picked up on this when I was at Halliburton with Jed DePaulo and Zeke Zarang and them. They didn't need any science, human science book to tell them they were naturally great leaders. But recognition was so important, and recognizing people, thanking people.
A public recognition,
especially. Public recognition. And we created you were involved and saw the programs we did with X Factor and the X Factor Awards and all of that. And had purposely spent time and brought these champions, found the champions.
And resources. It was a very involved thing. I mean, you guys brought them into a fantastic event to celebrate them and everything else. And I remember seeing that and thinking, man, that really is literally putting your money where your mouth is, because it took a lot of resources to do that, and it was attended by the CEO on down of the whole executive leadership.
That's right, and they believed in it, and thank God Brad trusted me.
Now the regional managers didn't get to go, but what are you going to do? I guess.
Yeah. That he trusted the intuition that I had about how to make that work, and we've continued to evolve that into the CEO's Pinnacle Awards, and we just had the celebration of that for 2021 yesterday, and had to do it virtually this year, but it's evolved, and it's continuing to be champions. And when you hear these stories of people, whether it's a service quality award, or we have an impact award, or it's the safety award, these great stories of literally people that are stopping the job or doing these things that are just who we are now. It's just part of the culture that if I went back and piled those stories over the years on top of each other, it's just this whole testament to how the organization's evolved. But it started with a few things, right? Mm-hmm. But now it is who we are.
Right.
That's our DNA now.
Well, and you mentioned people that come into that, they have a couple of different responses. And they'll show up and they'll either realize, oh wow, this is amazing, or they'll select themselves out because they'll feel like it's onerous or whatever, and they may return later and, like you said, be your biggest champions. Yeah. But I experienced that at Wildcat, where I work now. I tell people all the time, it's I wouldn't say easy, because none of it's easy. If it was, everyone could do it. Yeah. But it's remarkable in that we've gone out, and our management team came from big companies like your Halliburtons, your Schlumbergers, your BTIs, companies like that. And so these guys come in, and if I say to them, hey, let's begin an observation program, it's not, oh man, we don't want to do that. It's okay, cool. And they understand it. They already know the impact it can have, and they just jump right on board with it. And the employees that don't get on board select themselves out. Yeah. Some come back, some don't. But I think you're seeing that more and more in organizations, especially world-class organizations, that really that change isn't as difficult to achieve as it used to be. But it's still it's still to have lasting impact, that gets challenging.
Yes.
So what are some things that you've done in your career to have lasting impact? And obviously now you're in more of an operational type capacity and less HSE, but it's the same concept. You're still having to win over hearts and minds when you're changing the way someone's operationally functioned for ever.
Yeah.
So what are some things you're doing now to help kind of impact that in a positive way and have lasting change?
Well, I think one thing from a lasting impact is teaching and kind of transferring knowledge and getting others to grasp a different way of doing things. And so I like to mentor, some of the younger people and people that work for me. I purposeful about coaching them and helping them achieve what it is. And people that work directly for me, I always told them, I said, my job is to help you be a better you, help you be very marketable at whatever it is you want to do, and to help you build the skills and knowledge you need. If I can't hold on to you, and we can't hold on to great people in the company, we either have a leadership issue or a compensation issue or something, right? Mm-hmm. But that's my job then at that point. If I've helped build you and you're great, and the space isn't there for you, right? Mm-hmm. You're ready to go spread your wings.
Sure.
I have encouraged people to leave the organization and organizations that I've been in, because I knew that they had capability beyond what we were there. Did I want them to stay selfishly? Absolutely. But from a personal standpoint, they needed to go, because they needed to go do and take on a different leadership role, take on more responsibility. And that's the way it is. You need to build people up, make more champions, build people up. And you got it, and that's purposeful from a development standpoint. And so I think it's the same thing if you're leading the organization HSE-wise. You're going to transform, make your leaders better HSE leaders.
Right.
So a lot of it was coaching the CEO, coaching the chief operating officer, coaching other executives in the company, about how to be an HSE leader, right? And because it's not always just the rah-rah speeches, right?
Right.
It's the little things that they got to learn, and they've got to, because they're always looking for, and this is what I would tell HSE professionals working for me, people are always looking for a chink in the armor, right?
Sure.
They're looking for you to kind of roll your eyes and I didn't really see that happen.
Right. I didn't want to see that. Right.
Yeah. Right. But when you can coach them to embrace those things and challenge those things to stop them, then you're going to win and win all the time.
All the time. And I can speak from personal experience. I remember at Xterra, and I was going through a patch where I was kind of a little bit burnt out and maybe wasn't functioning at the level that I could be. And I remember you were in town. You were in Dallas. We were living in the Fort Worth area at the time. And I remember you called me and said, "Hey, let's have dinner." And you flat out asked me. You said, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Man, I like doing what I'm doing, but I like doing other things too." And even though I never reported directly to you, I can say you always made me feel like I've had a direct line to you.
Yeah.
And that was special to me, and it meant a lot. So I take this opportunity to say thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, but I'm purposeful about making sure other people that don't work for me that I'm helping mentor them. I've got several people in the organization that I mentored today, and I'm helping them try to build a better career for themselves, and because they want to be leaders, and sometimes you don't know how to be a leader.
Yeah, well, many times you don't. Many times you don't. And so tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now in terms of transforming the company. I know you've got some projects and things you're working through, and tell me what that means for the organization and ultimately the people the organization touch.
Yeah, so we have a project, a large transformation project that we've been on now for going on, I would say, 4 years when we started building the strategy in 2018 and beginning to just put our toe out there and step forward. And it's called Project Edge. And there's a whole thing that the consultants came up with what EDGE stands for. But basically, it's really taking and moving the organization way forward from where we are today. So we have about 6 different work streams that we've worked. One was our Oracle work stream. We were on the EBS on-prem platform of Oracle for all supply chain and EPM, ERM, all that. The problem was that we'd been on this platform since 2003 at Hanover, and 600 and almost 700 customizations built in it over the decades. And anytime you did try to update or anything, you break everything. So
everything breaks, yeah.
So we have taken and launched over the first couple of years there, we put all new HR platform in the Oracle Cloud. So we got rid of all the existing platforms that were not. And just in January, we took live about almost 36 modules of Oracle from cover all of our finance, all of our accounting, all of our supply chain, and new barcoding systems all went live at one time, all in Oracle Cloud, as well as at that time in parallel, we took the Microsoft Dynamics Field Service Dynamics program for our field service and replaced the one you'd be familiar with, the PXM program, Performex Mobile, that we took with us from when we left Xterra,
right?
Which we built and put out in 2010. So it was.
I was there for that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and it was 12 years old, and it just had, technology had run its course.
Sure.
And so we took all that live at one time. One huge big bang. There's a lot of story behind why we had to do that.
Yeah. But I bet there's a lot of story about what happened after that too. Right?
yeah, and change management for sure that. Yeah. It's been rough road there going live. In all honesty, Oracle's gone fantastic, and we've had some bumps in the road with the field service platform. But it is functioning. Everything's works. It just don't work like we expected it to work. So we've had to dial some of it back as we get it kind of fixed and working and all that. And that's when you're working with technologies, as much work and effort and hours and time we put into planning everything, there's things that your architect forgot, right?
Right.
And it's like, oh God, we didn't realize this piece of it, because you're moving, hundreds of integrations between modules that you had to build, as well as integrations to other outside tax systems and everything else. It's tough. But the one thing I would say that I've collected over the last 4 years in my logbook, you're going to the meetings and you're taking notes and all that, is I've got this whole list of lessons learned.
Sure.
Over the last 4 years, and I'm actually taking them out of the book now and recording them and really adding some color to them. But right now there's over 75 lessons learned.
Oh man!
So we'd have to come back for a whole other podcast to discuss.
That would be fantastic. What you need to do a book, Steve's Lessons Learned. That would be a fantastic book.
I've thought about that. I've talked to another guy that's was a transformation director for SenseCorp, which is a managing consulting firm that started with us, and they just recently in the last year got bought out by a larger consulting firm. But he and I have talked about potentially doing that, because transformation is not project management. Let me put it that way.
Right, it's not.
It's on mega steroids.
Yeah,
when
it's project management and everything else. And so what I find interesting, and the way that I would think about this if I were a safety professional listening to this, is safety professionals do some things really, really well. And one of those things, if you really get down to what we do a lot of times, is process.
Yes.
Figuring out process.
Yeah.
Whether the process is already functioning and you're figuring out what broke, or it doesn't exist and you're building it, or you're looking into the root cause of why something happened within an existing process, even though it didn't break, it's just something happened. And those types of things translate. If you're good at figuring out process and you're good at figuring out ways to build and manipulate process, that skill translates across an entire organization.
Absolutely.
And I find it interesting. Again, your background is it's pretty extensive. I didn't know you worked for the railroad, for instance, and that's cool. And I'm glad you didn't get into engineering school, because who knows if I'd even gotten to meet you. But throughout your career, you realize, man, if I can do process, there's a need for me. And there's something that I can bring to the organization, and I think that's great. So, what are some things that, from a lessons learned perspective, what's a couple of them that you could share with us that are just like, God, man, I should have known that, but I didn't, type of thing?
Well, I'd say the biggest lesson learned for the whole transformation effort, I'm not going to say it's the biggest one, because they're all big. But one of the important ones is the transformation has to stay in the C-suite. It has to stay there, meaning they've got to be very engaged with the transformation effort. And 100% our executive team has been phenomenal and intimately involved. And to give you an idea of the C-suite owning it, when we started out, we had all these 7 work streams identified. Oracle, replacing the mobile platforms, new supply chain processes were work streams. We equipped and modernized our whole fleet of 4,000 compressors with telematics, standardized all the tags, Modbus maps, and I'm talking stuff that a lot of people don't know what all that means, but it's immensely important in a transformation, especially data governance and getting your data right.
Right.
But we spent literally, as we were flushing out these strategies, the CEO would have the whole executive team, and he would say, I want a deep dive into telematics and how this is going to work, what we're going to do, how is this going to work. And we might do 4 or 5 hours with the executive team, and then he'd be like, this wasn't enough, we need another session.
Wow.
if they can't own it at that level and can't spend that kind of time with it, you're not going to be successful.
Well, they're going to feel like they got surprised with stuff.
Exactly. And they can, what happens also is, then when they go out to communicate the transformation, they don't know it as well as one of us that are daily in it and living it. But from a communication standpoint, they can communicate. They can answer really good questions with the right answers. And that level of ownership makes you better at what you're doing. And it's going to make the organization better because they get it. And it's really taking that vision that Brad had, and we're putting it down into concrete, transformative actions and plans. He's got to know it. He's got to say, yes, that's fulfilling my vision, or it's not. But they had to do it. And I say that because as we've gone along, we've benchmarked others that are doing transformation efforts in other companies. And they've came and talked to us. We've talked to them and some of these other organizations much larger than us and some smaller than us, but much larger. And when I talk to them, they're like, oh, you're kidding. Your executive team is still involved? Oh, yeah, we have to go meet them. It was every week, then it went to every other week we spent time with them for 4 years. Only in the last, since we went live with Oracle, have we gone to monthly.
Right, but that monthly meeting is probably still pretty intense.
It's pretty intense update, and it's formal, and it's, we're accountable for it. They're accountable for it because they're accountable to the board.
Absolutely.
And the board's well aware of what we're doing, right? And so it's been, that level is important because when I see these other companies that benchmarked us, and they're like, ours program's just falling apart. The C-suite went on to the next thing and just said, I figured it out, and we can't get the organization behind it now. Well, that's because the C-suite's not behind it. Yeah, they were checking a box and not owning the transformation. You can't let go of the transformation until it's transformed.
Till it happened.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's so important, whether you're trying to change something. Now, obviously, you're changing things that are at the root of the company. So that's a C-suite problem. But that field safety guy, that field representative that's out there, and he gets his directive from the guys in corporate saying, hey, this is what we're doing. And in my region, I was blessed with Gerald Minneke, who enjoyed being kind of the guinea pig. He liked doing that, and so we got an opportunity to constantly be doing that. But that field guy, I think it's important that that person understands also that C-suite to him is that regional manager that he works with, and that person's got to be involved. And if that person's not involved, what are some tips you could give to that person and say, here's how you get that person involved? If they keep saying, I don't have time for that, that's what we pay you for, that kind of thing. How do you bridge that gap? How do you close that loop?
Well, first of all, build a relationship with the person. And I know that, again, it's cliche and it's like, oh God, I've heard this, but it is important. But don't build just the business relationship. Understand what makes the person tick, how they think, and what's going on with them.
You mean a genuine relationship?
A genuine relationship. I'll give you a good example. Like when I was at Halliburton and I had gone into this operational quality kind of HSE kind of role in Halliburton, and I was working with the businesses out there. Had a really tough manager out of the Jacksboro area, D. Edwards, and he left Halliburton years later after being promoted and helped run Boots and Coots and all that. And he and I are just very dear friends and brothers now, just by different mothers.
Yeah.
Phenomenal guy and a great leader too. But one of the things that I did with him early on is he was in Jacksboro, I was in Duncan, Oklahoma. I said, I'm
not close to one another.
No. Yeah. So I said, he would come over to Duncan, and finally one day he and I are having words, and he said, I'll tell you what. He said, why don't you come over and spend the weekend with me at my house. I'm like, okay, I'll do that if that's what it takes. And so I went over, and we're sitting there drinking a few beers. We're watching the Rangers on TV. And so he gets to talking about his business, because I was telling him we really need to change this, and you need to be thinking differently about this or that, and because your margins are inconsistent, and without going into all kind of detail. He goes, well, I changed this, and I did this, and I did that. He goes, what do you think the problem is? And I looked him right in the eye. We're in his house, and I'm like, and you'd have to know D. He's like 6'5".
Yeah.
He's just
he's a large
human being. And I look him right in the eye, and I'm like, "You're the problem, not your team. You're the problem." And it was dead silence. He didn't say anything else. I got up. We finished watching the Rangers. Said goodnight. Got up the next morning, left, and went back. I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, my God. And
Well, that's over with. Yeah.
I walk into my office, and Duncan Monday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, and Dee's sitting in the chair in front of my desk.
Oh, fantastic.
He goes, what do we need to do? I'm the problem. I've got to change. And I said, well, you got great leadership skills, and great intuition, but you're overbearing. Mm-hmm. And so we just started talking about what to do and how to do it. And he transformed himself. And that's how our relationship got started. But sometimes you got to be brutally honest with people. But you can't be brutally honest if you don't have a relationship first. He and I had built a relationship, enough to where I felt confident that I could tell him the absolute truth.
Yeah, if you go in there, spitting truth immediately without a relationship or trust, man, that's a recipe for a disaster for sure. I like to tell a story. I still talk about when I came to interview here in Houston. I was flying back in. The company I worked for was based out of Canada, so I was coming back from Canada, and I was still living in a Midland. No, it wasn't. I was living in Tomball at the time, and I remember being asked, can you meet us at the Exterran offices, which was over in Greenspoint at that time, for interview? I said, yeah. So we go and we sit down, and there were two things that struck me. One, you're a big, gruff kind of guy, right? And that was cool. But then to hear you talk about heart and that kind of stuff, I was like, well, didn't expect that out of you. But that was cool to see. And then you asked me a question, and then I'll never forget this because it was fantastic. You said, how would you solve, because your compression mechanics are out there by themselves all the time. You said, how would you solve lone worker safety? And I sat there, and I'm interviewing for this job. And I'm like, man, I better have an answer for this. But I didn't have one. And I remember sitting there and I said, you know what, man, I don't know. I said, that's a really difficult thing to solve. And you looked at me and said, that's too bad. We were hoping you could tell us. And I started laughing, and I realized, I don't have to have all of the answers. I just have to be honest that I don't.
Yeah.
And that was something that always struck me working with you. It was just that brutal honesty, and like you said, working with D and telling him, you're the problem. But that, you're right, that can't happen without an established relationship, and so that's good. And I agree. If you don't learn who these people are that you're working with, you can't change anything. You can't get anything out of them, and they can't get anything out of you.
Yeah, and if you don't know them well enough to know where their struggles are or anything like that, and one thing I've learned in life, and a lot of it obviously at work, but start by giving people the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. If you start there, then you're really starting at a more positive aspect, right? Mm-hmm. And I've learned to do that. And I'm not saying I'm good at it today, because believe me, a lot of times I catch myself tripping over that and everything. But give people, the benefit of the doubt. And one of the other things is, cannot overemphasize being a lifelong learner. Too many people get the deal, they get the management job, or they get this opportunity and they quit learning.
Mm-hmm.
And learn something different. That will help your career as much as anything. And if you're an HSC guy, an HSC professional, CSP, I mean, hey, fantastic, right? Go learn more about human behavior.
Right.
Go learn how the financials work in the organization, because the more you want to change hearts, right? But you got to do it in a business perspective. You got to understand how the business runs, right? And that's one of the one things I did early on was understood. When I was at Halliburton, I put my hand up every time. Hey, here's a business fundamentals course, blah, blah, blah. Hey, I'm all for that. Let's go. And then later on, after I left Halliburton, I went back to school to learn finance, to learn accounting and all that. Not like an accountant, but I didn't feel like I was deep enough about understanding it, because you can't fix something if you don't understand how it works.
Right. If you don't understand the purpose and function within the organization that particular thing holds, you won't know how it impacts the next domino. And I remember that was very clear to me when we would do our workers' compensation reviews, and you would start seeing these huge reserves, and you're like, those are actual dollars. And those dollars translate into increased premium, which is true money coming out of the organization.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me. And I've used that as an opportunity to have conversations with managers, even today, even in my role today, where you're like, hey guys, that's fine. And we heard a guy and we have comp and that's all good. But at some point, those chickens come to roost
right.
too. And that stuff's important. And it was important to see how that impacted the organization. And again, huge mentor in my career, because you allowed us to see those things and felt like we should be included in those.
Absolutely. And it's had a very blessed career and a very blessed life. I've just been blessed with a lot of good leaders that were great examples, and actually been blessed by some really crappy leaders that taught me how I did not want to lead.
Sure.
And so don't always look at a crappy boss as good gosh, how'd I draw this short straw? What a great lesson to learn there, that I don't want to be that person, right?
Right. Understand what's happening there and
Right.
Purpose your life not to be that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you've made a huge impact on my life, and you've been a blessing to know all of these years, and it's been too long since we got a chance to reconnect, and this was a great opportunity to do that. So thank you so much for coming to the home studio and sitting and chatting with me and giving me a chance to kind of catch up and learn some new things about you. What if you were going to say something to someone starting their career in HSE or in any other part of the organization, but I kind of know probably what you'll say, but what would you say the key to being successful for that guy just starting out just as green as it gets?
Stick your hand up in there and say, I can do that, right? I can do that. If you've ever seen the movie Holes, and
I haven't seen that movie.
You need to watch the movie Holes, and part of it is where the teacher and it's this relationship going on with this guy that has farms and does things. So he'd roll across this lake, and she would be like, well, he's selling onions and fruit and stuff. And she'd be like, golly, the roof's leaking in the schoolhouse, and it's back in the day, old single schoolhouse.
When that was a real problem.
Yeah. And he'd like, I can fix that. And then it'd be like, well, the windows are stuck and they're not working. I can fix that. So take on responsibility. If you want to move your career, be the one to say, hey, I'll go work that derailment. Hey, yep, you need somebody to go dump rock? I'll go dump rock. Because that's what's going to give you opportunities. Because a degree and all that just gets you in the door. And if you want to be an 8-to-5 person and do that, there's lots of people that like that, and that's great. But if you want to move your career, you got to move yourself. And that's doing things that you might not want to do sometime, but looking for more responsibility, you got to go earn it.
Yeah, I agree. I can't say any better than that. So man, I really, like I said, I appreciate you being in my life and you just being a part of this podcast and continuing to be a mentor to me and to so many others that are going to listen to this. So,
well, hey, I'm just we all learn from hard knocks and stuff like that, but there's nothing more important than relationships, and especially the thing that's guided my wife and I for 42 years of marriage going on is our faith, though.
Sure.
And that's keep your moral compass pointed in the right direction, and it'll all be okay.
Yeah, it'll work out.
That's
for sure.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, man, thank you so much, and let's don't wait so long next time to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
My gosh, man.
I agree. Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it.
All right, buddy.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show and accept the mission. Please subscribe to the Mission Zero podcast on your preferred streaming service and be sure to give us a 5-star review.